looking at your fears as an opportunity to grow and thrive.
The idea that genes turn on and off by themselves is a complete fabrication. It's not true at all.
The number one toxin in the room is emotional trauma. It's kind of hard to escape life without trauma.
They were going to call it a magic bullet, a biological response modifier, they called it. We've got them.
He called me in the evening and said, Lisa, you have problems that are bigger than stage 4 metastatic breast and bone cancer. And after I got my jaw to stop from dropping, I said, okay, what's going on? And he said his radiologist had looked at the x-rays that the local hospital had sent, and that I had tumors on my spinal cord that were wrapped around the spinal cord. And if I didn't get emergency neurosurgery within 24 hours, it would be likely that I would be quadriplegic. Now, that wasn't in my game plan for life.
I think the toughest part of the journey is the emotional side. It's the diagnosis. It's, breaking that news to your family. It's changing your life in terms of, I would have, seen myself, my own value in completing work, in succeeding at tasks, whereas the focus just changes when you get a cancer diagnosis. That's not important anymore. What's important is that you are there for your family in the future and you don't die, and you do everything possible to help that situation.
I was supposed to be gone, according to the experts. I was supposed to be 20% chance to live 5 years. My daughter was supposed to be an orphan. My dad, who was dying, was supposed to see me die, according to the first information that I was given. My sweetheart, was supposed to lose me right after he found me. All of these things and the incredible vindication. And then, of course, the anger that comes up too with going, why don't more people know about this?
Hello and welcome to episode 1 of the Conquering Cancer docuseries, The Missing Link. I'm your host, Nathan Crane. Some of you may know me from my award-winning documentary, Cancer, The Integrative Perspective. Others of you have attended the Conquering Cancer Summit or Global Cancer Symposium or conferences that I've hosted over the years, or maybe you're a member of my Health and Healing Club. Others of you don't know me at all and are brand new to the Conquering Cancer community. Either way, I'm honored and excited to welcome you to this groundbreaking documentary series, which is honestly my most impactful and transformational series yet. The truth is, I know how scary and painful it is to be sick and dying, and I know how devastating it is to lose someone from cancer. I lost my grandfather to cancer and felt hopeless as I watched him suffer the painful treatments that he endured. And even before that, I had my own near-death experience living homeless as a teenager in Bozeman, Montana, struggling with addiction, sickness, pain, and suffering. I also know that it's possible to reclaim your health, find purpose and meaning in life, experience a heightened level of vitality, and even reverse cancer using holistic approaches. And that's why I'm excited you're here with me during this series. No matter how you got here, it's likely for one of 4 reasons. 1, you or a close friend or family member currently has cancer and you want to learn the best ways to heal from it. Or 2, you're a cancer survivor who wants to do everything in your power to stop cancer from ever coming back. Or the 3rd reason, you might be somebody who wants to understand how to prevent cancer from forming in the first place. This is vitally important because as the statistics show, 1 in every 3 women and 1 in every 2 men will be impacted by cancer in their lifetime. Or the 4th reason is that you're a healthcare practitioner who really cares about your patients and wants to learn what more can be done to facilitate healing from cancer. No matter your personal relationship to cancer, I welcome you, and I guarantee that throughout our time together over the next 9 episodes, you're going to come away educated and empowered as you discover the shocking, often overlooked causes of cancer, and more importantly, how the body is able to heal itself. We're calling this documentary series The Missing Link because we dive much deeper than ever before in any of my previous cancer series into that overlooked ingredient of healing that is common in the people who not only survive cancer, but end up thriving. For some of you, the idea of having a better life after being diagnosed with cancer may seem impossible, but I assure you that it's not. And I'm happy that you're going to meet some incredible, courageous cancer conquerors who share exactly what they did and what they learned from their cancer experience. For those of you who want the more practical, hands-on, nuts and bolts formula for recovering from cancer and even avoiding it in the first place, don't worry, we've got plenty of that too. Throughout this series, you'll meet leading experts in their field who've been working hands-on with patients for decades. They've collectively treated and impacted the lives of hundreds of thousands of people through their clinical practice and through the dozens of books that they've written. And it isn't just cancer that their patients are preventing and healing from. What you'll learn will also help you prevent and even reverse chronic diseases such as heart disease, autoimmune disease, and even diabetes. What we've done with this documentary series is we've extracted and then organized this wealth of knowledge in a way to help you get the most from it. We've focused in on the most important, beneficial, life-saving elements that everyone needs to know to live a long, healthy life. So once again, I want to thank you for being here. I can't wait to get started. Let's jump into episode 1.
I asked him, why do you think I've got breast cancer? What do you think's behind this? I was just curious to see what he said. And he said, well, there are 2 reasons. 1, genetics. 2, you're a woman. Yeah. And my eyebrows shot up, and he said, well, more women get breast cancer than men. And I thought, if that's the level of analysis I'm going to get here, and this is a dedicated breast care center, I know I have to go elsewhere.
It's just amazing to me that most oncologists, medical professionals have no idea what the drugs are they're prescribing or using.
I was so lost in the woods when I got my cancer diagnosis. I had been healthy all my life and had not expected, that I had cancer. And there's so much information out there to wade through. I was going crazy, trying to look at all the information in the internet and sift through and figure out what was valid and what wasn't.
Despite the billions of dollars invested in the war against cancer and all the modern medical equipment that's now available, people seem to be sicker than ever. Why is that? Could it be that our modern day medical system is actually set up in a way that ensures a steady stream of patients? What is it that doctors aren't learning in medical schools that will actually help their patients heal? In this episode, we're exploring the limitations of our current medical approaches to cancer, but we're also looking at the hidden opportunities for preventing and healing cancer and other chronic diseases. So I'm really happy you're joining us. Let's dive in. Dr. Jen Simmons was trained in conventional Western medicine and spent the first 17 years of her career as one of the country's top breast cancer surgeons. When she became ill in 2015, she discovered that conventional medicine didn't provide the level of care that she needed or wanted. Her own search for answers led her to functional medicine. She became so enamored with the prospect of preventing and reversing disease rather than masking symptoms that she left her prestigious position in 2019 to start Real Health MD, a functional medicine oasis for those affected by breast cancer. Her course, My Answer to Breast Cancer, helps motivated women put their breast cancer diagnosis behind them by providing the tools they need to build real health. In this interview with Dr. Jen, you'll hear about her own experience, how it opened her eyes to critical learning that she never received in medical school, and the underlying causes of cancer that she never even knew about as a cancer surgeon. So, going from a breast cancer surgeon to a functional medicine doctor, that's a huge shift. I've met a handful in my life so far who were either conventional oncologists or conventional medical doctors who had some major aha moment, awakening moment that said, look, this is not what I thought it was. And then they went down and then they became either a functional medicine doctor or a holistic medical doctor, or completely scrapped their medical license altogether and just dove deep into holistic medicine. I think we're starting to see this more and more for various reasons, but I'd love for you, if you take a moment, What was that big shift for you? Was it the autoimmune disease, and how did that whole shift happen?
So, my friend once told me he wanted to understand the story. He said, so you're driving down the Autobahn in your Porsche and you pull over, get out of your car and get into a Prius. Like, what's up with that, right? So, I went into medicine and breast surgery very, very intentionally. So my first cousin was a woman named Linda Creed. Linda was a singer-songwriter in the 1970s, 1980s. She wrote all of the music for the Spinners and the Stylistics. She and her writing partner, Tommy Bell, they wrote like 54 hits in all, but the most famous song that she wrote was The Greatest Love of All. So she wrote that in 1977 as the title track for the movie The Greatest, but it really got its fame from when Whitney Houston released it in March of 1986. And there it spent 14 weeks at the top of the charts, but Linda would never know that because at 36 years old, Linda died of metastatic breast cancer. And she was like my hero. And so that other people's families did not have to have the experience that my family had, the only thing I knew how to do, I became a breast surgeon to try to make an impact in that world. And I did it really well for a long time. And in addition to being a surgeon, I'm a wife, I'm a mother, I'm an athlete, I'm a philanthropist, and I'm keeping all of these balls in the air. And then in 2015, they all went crashing to the ground. Like I lost my health. And I'm sitting there in my doctor's office and I have an autoimmune disease of the thyroid called Graves' disease, and it's treated exactly like cancer. For all intents and purposes, that's how it's treated. So I'm sitting there listening to him tell me that I need surgery and I need radiation and I need lifelong thyroid replacement hormone. And it's like Charlie Brown's teachers in my ear, right? All I hear is womp, 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 womp. And, these are things that I tell people to do every single day without hesitation, without reservation. Like, don't even think about it. Of course you should have your breast removed. Of course you should get chemotherapy. Of course you should get radiation. Right. But then when it's coming at me, I'm like, just hang on a second, because I don't see why God would give me an organ that I'm just to remove and then replace with some artificial drug. Right?
So that thought never came to you before when working with your patients, doing surgery on your patients. It only came to you in that moment when it was faced for your own body.
Yep.
Wow.
Which now my woke self is a little embarrassed, but I also didn't even know what functional medicine was.
Right.
And so in the course of my disease, as I'm like having horrible insomnia and I'm up all night on Dr. Google, which is, what I tell everyone not to do, but that's what I did. And I'm researching how to cure thyroid disease. And it comes up again and again, diet, 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 diet. And here I am thinking like, well, I'm a doctor. I'm not overweight. I must know everything there is to know about nutrition. And then I'm like, well, maybe I don't. So I enrolled in the Institute for Integrative Nutrition. I was going to learn more about nutrition, learn more about diet, and hopefully I'll be able to heal myself. And it was one of the very first lectures, and a man comes up on the stage. His name is Dr. Mark Hyman, introduces himself and says he's a functional medicine doctor. Now here I am thinking that I'm some big mahaf. I'm this big surgeon and I've been practicing for 17 years at that point. I never heard of a functional medicine doctor. What is a functional medicine doctor? And so I'm in my mind opening phase of my life, right? I'm wanting enlightenment, and I start to listen to him talk about what it means to be a functional medicine doctor. And within 5 minutes, I'm like, oh my God, of course, this is my calling. This is why I got sick, because I was meant to learn about this. I was meant to do this. This is what I was meant to do. Like, I had never felt so right until that moment.
Do you remember what he said that sparked that within you so powerfully, or roughly some of the concepts that he talked about?
Oh no, I remember exactly. So he's talking about 84% of Americans are metabolically abnormal, and that 80% of chronic disease is attributed to diet, and 800,000 Americans die a year due to food-related illnesses. And I'm picturing the parade of my patients, and they're getting younger and younger and younger, and bigger and bigger and bigger. And I'm like, that's it. It's the diet. It's the diet. Now, of course, it's not only the diet, because we have a lot of problems in our food system. The quality of the food is one, but there's a lot of pesticides, herbicides, fungicides, antibiotics. Like, there are a lot of problems deeply ingrained in our food system. But it occurred to me in that moment that, like, I was on the wrong end of things. Me cutting out the tumor doesn't do anything to change the trajectory of their lives. It doesn't address why they got cancer, and it doesn't help them to not get cancer afterwards. All I'm doing is prolonging the inevitable and leaving a pretty big scar behind. And I was an oncoplastic surgeon. Like, I thought I was offering people this great silver lining where I was gonna, what don't you like about your breast? Let's fix it this time around. And then after that, I was like, oh my God, what did I do? No, I did the best I could with the information that I had. I was very, very, very well intentioned, but I wasn't helping.
When you went to medical school, did they talk to you at all about natural medicine, holistic medicine, good or bad? I mean, did they talk about it at all? Did they dissuade you from it? Did they tell you there's no science to support it? Did they never even mention it? Diet, lifestyle, nutrition, natural medicine, all these things. What did you hear about it in medical school?
So in medical school, I went to Jefferson, and I think that Jefferson is one of the first medical schools in the country to have an integrative medicine department. But what that meant to me, at least my understanding, I mean, none of us ever rotated through there. It was always considered like a little bit on the side in obscurity. And what it essentially meant to all of us was, oh yeah, that's like a primary care doctor who also believes in acupuncture, or some kind of adjunctive thing that was put on top of or added to the traditional medical model. And I think that that's how it operated there for a long time. I think that they're making strides to change that now. But as a medical student, we really weren't introduced to any integrative therapies. You really had to go seek it out. And as far as our education around nutrition, we did the minimum. So in your first year of medical school, you have 1 week where you meet 3 hours a day and talk about nutrition, and the focus is on like things that we don't see anymore: scurvy, rickets, those kinds of things, PKU in newborns, obscure diseases. But never was there a conversation about what your body needs, how to nourish, how to heal. There was no conversation around that, and I'm pretty sure by and large that still exists today.
Why do you think that is?
I think that doctors are really uncomfortable with not being needed. And I know that's like a horrible thing to say, but I think that they want to think that they're integral in the process and like there's some magic there that they're offering. And it makes them really uncomfortable for people to say like, no, I can do that myself somehow.
Why do you think the medical schools themselves are not teaching this to the medical students? I mean, I know medical students who have reached out to me and said things like, yeah, in our medical school, they have told us that natural medicine has no science to support it, and that they completely are dissuaded from even researching it and to stay away from it completely. I mean, I have, theories and history and a deeper, belief and perception of why this is, but I want to know why you think it is.
So I'm going to tell you what I think. Doctors think that if this were true, they would have been taught it. If this were important, they would have been taught it. So they immediately dismiss it as false because they weren't taught it in medical school. And this cycle just keeps repeating itself. So until people like me who have seen the other side go back and start to educate the youth, this cycle is just going to perpetuate itself.
Well, it has to be taught by the professors in the classes too, right?
It does. So where are they getting their education, right? Because when they were educated, people weren't talking about this. And so they have that same perception that if it were true, if it were important, I would have learned it. I didn't learn it. It's neither true nor important.
Well, I think it goes back to who funds the medical textbooks as well.
Well, that's absolutely true. So I was in conversations with a hospital, and they wanted me to come on and be their chief of integrative oncology. And I said, great. What are we going to do about the cafeteria? And they said, what do you mean? And I said, well, you can't have people have their colon removed and offer them eggs and bacon and pancakes for breakfast the next day. Like, we have a great opportunity for people to learn how to take care of themselves. And the answer to me was that if the food in the cafeteria is too healthy, people give lower rating scores to their hospital stay, and the hospital's not willing to do that.
Whoa.
Okay, let's take that off of the table and let's reframe it and think about the greater good. So you have someone that comes in with a heart attack, and you're able to reverse them with a drug, or they get a cardiac cath and they're able to get an angioplasty or a stent or something like that. Like, you have a teachable moment there. Why don't we capitalize on that and teach them how to live so that they don't have a next cardiac event? And the response I got was, but we need them to have the next cardiac event because that's how we get paid. So the way that our system is designed is to reward sickness. And so there is absolutely no motivation for doctors, for hospitals, for pharmaceutical companies to teach people how to be well. And so they don't.
Right. And it's sad.
And
it's so
sad.
And if you look at the studies, there's some really interesting studies and reporting that's been done that, some medical schools, many medical schools actually rely a pretty substantial portion of their entire budget from funding from pharmaceutical companies, right? So that's a medical school. Now, on top of it, the actual funding of the medical literature, the textbooks that are given to the professors to teach from, are the writers and the editors of them rely substantially on pharmaceutical money to pay them to actually write these textbooks. So if we go back to understand why pharmacology is really one of the main focuses in medical school, right? And not nutrition, not diet, not lifestyle, not functional medicine, go back and
6 months on pharmacology.
Follow the money, right? Follow the money.
6 months on pharmacology, 1 week on nutrition.
And it was nutrition that was for scurvy that we know all you need to do is eat some more
lemons. Have some vitamin C, right? Eat an orange.
Eat some lemons and limes, orange, and you're fine, right? Like, it's not like all of this nutrition we're going to talk about here that actually can help your body heal from diseases like cancer. So we know that, and it's sad, and that needs to change. And I want to honor and respect you for, shifting yourself out of that against all odds, right? And getting into more functional medicine approach. Now, with your own autoimmune disease, what did you change in your life, and did you heal that, or are you still dealing with it?
So I think anyone with autoimmune disease, like we're always walking the line, right? So I live super duper duper clean. I didn't know what that meant before. I learned what that meant. And listen, Rome wasn't built in a day, right? So I am a former sugar addict. Hello, my name is Jen and I'm a sugar addict, right? And I'm not always perfect, but I have to always be pretty good. So right now I have no symptoms, and by the grace of God, I hope that it continues that way, but that, you know, I'm not going to tell you that it's easy. It gets easier, and I just know that, like, this is where I live, right? But I think that healing is possible for everyone, but that path to healing is different for everyone. So it is entirely dependent on what your triggers are, what led to your dysfunction. And so for everyone, that's really different. And I had to do a lot of work on, you know, I had to do a lot of spiritual work. I had to do a lot of stress work. I had to, you know, really change the narrative in my head from you have to be perfect all the time, you have to be on the go all the time, to allow myself to have some rest, to have some relaxation, to have some appreciation, to enjoy the small moments. And so I really had a lot of realigning to do in my life in order to get well. And again, I'm not going to tell you that I don't go through periods where I'm working too much or I'm doing too much, because that happens. And then I notice the shifts in my body, and I make the changes that are necessary to make. But it's about creating an awareness around yourself and really trusting yourself and being your own best doctor.
And I said, I'd like to see that report. And it showed that the first ultrasound was 8 months after the biopsy. It had already gone from 9 millimeters to 8 millimeters in that time. Not even trying very hard, but on the best diet I knew how at the time. So it's been falling in size the whole time. And they hadn't told me. And I don't understand that.
You have to take everything that's said and run it through your own system and see what feels right in your heart. And when it doesn't feel right in your heart, or there's a disconnect between your head and your heart, you know, I'm hearing this, but I'm feeling this. I think you have to go with what you know is best for you. You know, I'm 67 years old. I think I know my body better than an oncologist that I just met and see, you know, maybe 15 minutes every 3 months. You know, I mean, when they told me I would have to go to rehab for 3 months, I thought, no, that's not happening. I'm going to go home where I'm going to do well, and I'm going to do what I need to do every day, and that's going to be my therapy.
Now let's talk to people who have, let's say, you know, we have 2 people tuning in, maybe 3 people's interest tuning in, right? One is someone who is very interested in preventing ever getting cancer in the first place, and maybe doesn't have a cancer diagnosis, maybe has some other underlying health challenges or not. But then we have people who have cancer and are looking to reclaim their health, right? And if you have cancer, that's already a sign. You know, I love, I believe it's Sayer G, who I've heard say this multiple times, that you don't.
I love him.
You don't get sick because you have cancer. You get cancer because you're already sick, right? So if you have cancer and you're watching this and you hear what we're talking about, you know, you already have a compromised immune system, because the immune system is critical in helping your body to remove cancer cells. So you do need to be a little more concerned if you have cancer. You do need to be a little more concerned about any viral infection, right? Mm-hmm. But isn't it true that the same things, many of the same things you'll do to enhance your immunity, enhance your body's ability to heal itself from a viral infection, are the same things you would be doing, or very similar, to help with cancer?
The very same. And so, you know, those 3 groups of people that you are talking about, that's who I'm talking to every single day, because it's all about creating an anti-inflammatory environment. Cancer is a normal response to an abnormal environment. There's something about the microenvironment in whatever organ we're talking about that is saying to those cells, you're not safe. They go into survival mode. That's what's happening. So it's all about creating that atmosphere of calm for them, putting them at rest, finding that balance, right? And so the way that we do that is we do things that promote our health. And so when I talk to all of those people, I talk to them about nutrient-dense, whole food, plant-based eating, because that's really what we need to fuel all of the processes that our body needs to do. We need all of those nutrients from a plant-based diet in order to do that. And there are specific things in a plant-based diet that drive different functions. So depending on what type of cancer that you're talking about, you may want to double down on certain things, like the leafy greens, like the cruciferous, like mushrooms, like the onion family, like the brassicas, like garlic, that kind of thing. So you may be thinking about structuring your diet, your everyday diet, around those and just enhancing that with all the other colors. So really eating the rainbow is the anti-cancer diet, right? That is what is going to nourish your body and give it what it needs. But your body also needs other sources of nourishment, right? So we take in our nourishment as food, but there are lots and lots of other things that nourish us, right? We're nourished by our spirituality. We're nourished by our relationships, by our connections with one another. We're nourished by a purpose-driven life. We're nourished by proper movement. And that is really key for people, because movement staves off depression, makes us stronger, increases our cardiovascular capability. It lowers blood pressure, it lowers blood sugar. It does so many things in our body. So it's so very important for prevention, for treatment, for disease reversal, right? And then it's also about stress and stress management and how you are perceiving the world around you and the meaning that you're giving to it, right? Because we all have stress and the stress isn't going anywhere. But the only meaning that stress has is that meaning that you give it, that you assign to it, that you allow it to have. And there are techniques that you can build, that you can load up in your toolbox to help you to manage those things, to dismiss those things, to allow you to decide what comes in and what meaning that has when it comes in. And so working along those lines and really building a good toolbox there is super important. And then our environment. And in as much as we can control it, getting rid of those toxins that surround us, and you're never going to be able to get rid of all of them, right? It's impossible in this world. I think the average child is born with 250 chemicals in their cord blood. So, you know, we're already starting off behind the 8 ball, but you can do better. And that's all we can do is do better, right? So you can choose not to drink out of plastic. You can choose not to store in plastic. You can choose not to do takeout. You can choose these things. You can choose not to use traditional cleaners and not to use perfume and not to burn candles. And, you know, there are a lot of choices that we can make that make our environment better, healthier, less toxic. And lastly, so many people have dealt with trauma. And trauma has short-term consequences, but it also has a significant amount of long-term consequences. And I love the work that they're doing at Hopkins around psilocybin. Anyone who knows me knows I am a big believer in mushrooms. They are a kingdom like our kingdom, and they have tremendous, tremendous health benefits. And the work that they're doing around psilocybin in people with metastatic cancer is just absolutely amazing. And I'm really hopeful and excited for that to be released into the cancer community so that so many more people can benefit from it.
I think you just laid a pretty beautiful, simple, solid foundation for taking care of our health from just about any chronic ailment, whether it's cancer, it's a viral infection, it's diabetes, it's heart disease, it's autoimmune disease. There's so many similarities in these, right? They're almost, I interviewed Dr. Dean Ornish for this series. I want to make sure people go and watch that because, you know, he's theorizing, which I've come to realize over the years in doing hundreds of these interviews and reading hundreds of research articles, thousands by now, thousands of hours, over 15 years in the natural health field now, that all of these diseases are so related. They're just showing up in the body in a different way. He's saying they're all pretty much the same disease, right? And it makes so much sense.
Different manifestations, right? They're different manifestations of inflammation.
That's it.
So
I mean, that's it.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
No, I was just going to say that, you know, what inflames me may not be what inflames you. But if we both have inflammation, we're going to manifest it somehow. So, you know, my children will hate me for saying this, but like I have 2 kids that are still acting like teenagers, and when they're outside of my house, they act like petulant children and they eat things that don't make them feel well. And one of them manifests with weight gain, and one of them manifests with like depression, anxiety. And I can always tell when they're eating a lot outside of the house, right? And they manifest it so differently, and they get angry at each other. Well, you know, one thinks that the other one has the better deal. Listen, they're both terrible deals. Like manifestations of inflammation are awful for everyone.
Yeah.
And the key is to not get inflamed.
Right. And all these things you talked about, plant-based, you know, nutrient dense, whole foods diet, not the frozen junk crap food, right? That can be vegan or plant-based. You're not getting the life force from that food that you need, the energy, the nutrients, the vitamins. It's got to be, you know, primarily living foods, right? But obviously legumes are in there. So we don't need to get in those specifics. We have an entire episode all about the most evidence-based anti-cancer diet. I want to make sure people go watch that. I encourage you to watch that and learn about that. But, you know, you touched on so many topics that we cover in so much depth in this series. So this is a great sounding board. This is a great, you know, you have such a powerful way of explaining things from your own experience coming from a conventional, you know, surgical medical model to now being, you know, a beacon of hope, a voice for, you know, functional medicine, because this is the future of medicine. There's no doubt in my mind that, you know, as these old systems deteriorate and crumble over time because people stop choosing them, it's these new systems that will replace them because we're choosing healthier foods, organic foods, locally grown foods, because we're choosing to live with less stress, to meditate, to take care of our mental, emotional, spiritual well-being, because we're choosing to live in homes and environments and closer to nature that are reducing our toxic burden, right? It's these choices every day. We vote with our dollar, we vote with our feet, we vote with our voice, we vote with our choices every day what we want. And what more and more people are saying they want is exactly what you're teaching, exactly what you're talking about.
I noticed as a patient that there were several gaps in the healthcare system. Even being a nurse and knowing what I know, there were things that weren't told to me that I knew should have been told. And then there are other areas that I had to do the research myself, because anytime I'd ask a professional, any of my healthcare team, I wouldn't get really any answers, especially on like diet. You know, they're just concerned that you keep your nutrition, that you're maintaining your weight. There really wasn't any education on what are some healthier choices. You know, all these years you've been eating these things. What are some different ways that we can manage your nutrition? To me, that's like the baseline, like we need to address.
Regular medicine has its place. You know, Western medicine has its place. We all know that. You know, it's for diagnostic, you know, tools for acute situations, for car accidents, for certain things. But for chronic illnesses that are not getting to the root cause, of things, I feel like we have failed, in that.
Stop feeding yourself poison and start eating really good food and see how good you feel. See how great you can start to feel, because it really does work.
What a great discussion with Dr. Jen Simmons. Not only did she share what she was able to learn after 17 years of practicing medicine as a top breast cancer surgeon, but she laid out a foundation of many of the important areas we're going to dive into throughout this entire docuseries. Dr. Jen also mentioned that she loved the work of Sayerji, who you'll get to meet in this next episode. Sayerji is an author, activist, speaker, and widely recognized thought leader in the natural health and wellness space. He's the founder of GreenMedInfo.com and co-founder of Stand for Health Freedom, as well as the author of the book Regenerate, Unlocking Your Body's Radical Resilience Through the New Biology. Starting in early childhood, Sayer endured many years of health issues. He wrote Regenerate in the hopes that he can help others who are experiencing persistent symptoms of sickness to really help pause and consider that their bodies are sending a message that something they're consuming, breathing, or even thinking is toxic or biologically incompatible with wellness. It's a fantastic read. I encourage you to get a copy of the book. And in this interview with Sayer, we dive into some of the topics in Regenerate, specifically around the current medical model and how that impacts cancer patients. One thing you don't want to miss is Sayer's explanation of why every single disease on this planet can be cured, as he says. This is a fascinating discussion, so be sure to watch it till the end. In your book, you talk a little bit about your own kind of personal childhood health challenges, which eventually led you to the great work that you're doing today. Would you mind sharing a little bit about kind of your personal journey of healing and share with all of our listeners what led you to discovering, this more natural approach to health and healing and creating GreenMedInfo and eventually writing this book?
Sure, I'd love to, Nathan. Thank you. So my health journey began probably pretty early in terms of being a sick infant and having the need for, allopathic interventions to ostensibly save my life, because I was diagnosed with bronchial asthma at 6 months. They used to inject me with epinephrine and give me various pharmaceuticals. And ultimately what happened is I was a pretty sickly, depressed, sad child with a lot of medical trauma. And it wasn't until I went to college, actually, that I started to explore alternative views of health and well-being. And I started to clean out my diet and start, engaging detoxification. And that's when I was amazed. I never needed an inhaler again. Unless, of course, I cheated on my diet, which was primarily dairy-free. To me, cow's milk was really my a thorn in my side. And so that was what brought me to this space. It was really not so much an academic pursuit. It was more of a life-death necessity for me to learn what were the actual causes at a root level of my disease and my ailments. And then as I went deeper down the rabbit hole, I started to understand that there's this massive body of science that actually documents how, in fact, folkloric medicine and, grandma's, kitchen cupboard cures are really evidence-based in a way that I never knew about. And that there's huge research on the unintended adverse effects of the conventional standard of care, pharmaceuticals, vaccines, even diagnostic technologies like X-ray mammography, can contribute to cancer. These things just blew my mind. And ultimately, over many years of working with people, helping them also to regain their health through natural approaches, I realized that fundamentally people needed, first of all, I needed to scale myself, because I would actually spend hours telling people the same thing, okay, let's go to the produce case at the health food store and let's talk about how kale and carrots are like the best medicine. And then after hearing myself talk for 10 years, I was like, okay, there's gotta be a better way. So that's the birth of social media. 2007 and 8 was when I created GreenMedInfo and started to index all this research from Medline, which now is about almost 80,000 abstracts across 10,000 health topics that give you the evidence that, many still believe doesn't exist. on how natural medicine is actually extremely powerful and very much based in science. And that's how I came to ultimately do the work that I love to do, and that has unfortunately become very politicized because pharma is very much in control when it comes to the media, the government, and we are presently being defined as enemies, even of the state, for simply advocating informed consent. And hey, there's this information out there, so they're like, let's kill the messenger, let's defame the messenger. And that's really what I'm seeing happen to myself and many of my well-respected colleagues.
Well, we've seen that in cancer specifically for decades, right? But now with COVID, like, we're seeing it at an all-time high, this censorship, this, trying to eradicate anything other than what the mainstream narrative is based upon, right? And discrediting anybody who is coming out and saying there are natural solutions for your health with this. You don't have to be as afraid as they're telling you, right? And you being truly one of the leaders in the space, helping to inform and educate people on what they can really do to take back control of their health, have been ostracized, among some of the others, more than anybody. I mean, how has that been for you in knowing that what you're doing is, one, truly serving people's higher good, but then being completely, discredited or falsely discredited by the media? I mean, what's that been like?
Well, yeah, thanks for asking. I mean, really, I've been working through it. And ultimately, like, there is this quote about how if you tear out a man's tongue, you're not proving him a liar. You're just proving that you're afraid of what he's saying. And that's what we're seeing with massive deplatforming and cancel culture, where, open debate and, of course, your constitutionally protected freedom of speech is essential more than ever, not just for democratic principles and processes, but obviously for informed consent, which is really a medical ethical principle that if we don't obey, then we're violating basic human rights. Meaning, in order to have informed consent, you need access to the information that clearly shows you both the risks and the benefits. And that's all that really I've ever done, is attempt to put out free resource that people can use to access that peer-reviewed published research. And instead of people taking issue with JAMA and Lancet and whatever journal we're basically citing, they instead try to attack the messenger and really try to make an example of him or her so that people are intimidated to not speak out.
I want to kind of transition a little bit into your chapter on cancer in the book. The chapter's incredible. It's called Beyond Gene Mutation. And you open up with the history of when Richard Nixon signed the National Cancer Act in 1971, which allocated $1.4 billion at the time to fight the war on cancer, right? Can you speak a little bit to the disastrous results of that so-called war that we've been experiencing for a number of decades now, and how in the last 50 years since then, and billions of dollars later, right, that 1.4 billion has turned into many, many more billions. How our scientific, pharmacological, medical approach to cancer has not really reduced cancer diagnoses or deaths, and in fact may have contributed towards its proliferation.
So I think people probably need to understand more about the history of how we came up with the so-called mutational view of cancer's origin, which is this concept, right, that there's this nucleus within all our cells, and it's like a ticking time bomb. There are these mutations that we were just born with because, the universe is based on really fundamentally chaotic and nihilistic principles, and life kind of sucks, and it's just a matter of time before you go. And it has nothing to do with the environment, none of the chemicals. You could have smoked for decades, and yes, now we know there's a genetic link with smoking, etc. But back then the idea was, it was actually, believe it or not, the idea was to cover up the known environmental causes of illness with the idea of something equivalent to a germ, which is what the gene-based view of disease was a twin of, which was that, again, the genes are responsible, not what you do to the cell, not the fact that the tobacco industry, for example, funded a lot of the original genome research into cancer, because they were trying to distract from the reality, which is they already knew that smoking caused cancer. So
Right.
instead of, right, the smoking gun, literally, not just a metaphor, the smoking gun, they wanted people to think, oh no, it's something else buried in your genes. It doesn't have anything to do with that. And the same is true for germ theory. It's always a way of getting around the fact that the causes of disease in the cell are very clear. You either have nutritional incompatibilities or deficiencies, or you have environmental exposures, non-native EMF, toxicants, radionuclides. There's an infinite number of chemicals that are carcinogenic, genotoxic, mutagenic, but that was the whole psyop. You know, the chemical industry spawned pharma, actually. If you look at IG Farben and their focus on dyes and other chemicals, they happened to invent the original pharmaceuticals by accident. I mean, in fact, there's a lot of psychogenicity to things like artificial food colorings, coal tar food colorings. So that's why they don't use them in Europe. In the US, everyone is pretty much on default low dose psychiatrics, which is why ADHD and food coloring is so linked. But IG Farben and the chemical industry spawned pharma, which is why pharma actually uses as seed stock a lot of the petrochemicals to produce their highly toxic xenobiotics. Okay, so xenobiotic means foreign to bios, so life or the body. Pharmaceuticals, by definition, are pretty much synthetic and alien to our metabolism. They're poisons. So they're patented poisons that have certain side effects that they take the primary side effect they want, like it could be amnesiac. So they call it Ambien and they market it as like beneficial, even though it's like literally killing people. It's like a black box label now, a warning. So in other words, the whole thing was a scam, right, from the beginning. So allopathy is a form of sorcery, in my opinion. It's meant to deceive, and it actually means that literally, pharmakia and pharmakos and all these ancient words in Greek. Okay, so pharmakia, there's a human sacrifice meaning there. There's also poisoner. That's literally where the word pharmaceutical comes from. And they basically deceive people into thinking they're not responsible for their health. Nothing that they feel in their body's real. Disease comes from a lack of drugs or from exposure to invisible particles. So then you need to trust the witch doctor and the white coat with these magical vaccines they inject into you, or these little magic pills, which are like the Eucharist, right? Because it's the church. It's like a little wafer that you bow down to, you're indoctrinated to. And that is basically what I have observed. Now, in my book, I don't go so poetic, mythological. I go more into the actual detailed science and history. But when you really look down the rabbit hole, you find out that the history of treating cancer and fighting the war against cancer was really just a war on the body / the populations that at that time needed to be captured and controlled by another system that ultimately just basically deceived people into thinking that, again, illness is something that just happens to you. You have to manage it. You have to be controlled by the priesthood of the medical monotheists, and that, we are helpless fundamentally.
Wow. I mean, you've explained that better than I think I've heard anybody ever explain it up to this point. And it's so true and so sad that, it's hopeful on one hand that we see millions of people waking up to this truth that you're talking about, you write about in the book, the great work you're doing, you've done through Green Med Info. And yet there are still so many people that are so asleep to, the fact that there are natural solutions for our health, that cancer is not something you catch, it's something you make, right? It's something that's actually could be considered to prolong your life because of, the lifestyle choices or the environment that you're living in or have been living in or has been handed down to you, right, from your own parents, grandparents, and so forth. And that we do have control over our destiny, that our genes are not our destiny, right? That we actually can, through environmental behaviors, through environmental lifestyle behaviors, we can actually express genes on and off, right? That we can allow the suppression of cancer genes, and we can create the activation of cancer genes. And, this is still taught in medical school today. I had somebody write to me recently. She was in, I think, her 3rd or 4th year of medical school. And she wrote to me and she said, You are killing people. You are lying to people. They teach us in medical school that, natural medicine doesn't work. There's no science that backs it up. And I'm reporting you right now. And I was just like, it blew my mind, right? That this is still what is being taught. Even through GreenMed Info, you have 77,000, almost 80,000 abstracts that show, the evidence-based approach of natural medicine for health and healing and reduction of, chronic inflammation and metabolic diseases and, so much proof there. And yet they're still being taught in medical school that this stuff doesn't work. It blows my mind.
Yeah, well, you said some really important things. Like, for example, cancer isn't just something bad that happens to you, but it's something your body does as an intelligent and adaptive response to the environment. So, I wrote a book with Dr. Charles Majors and then Dr. Ben Lerner initially called Cancer Killers. And it was all summarized in this very good phrase around, you don't get sick because you have cancer. You're already sick, and cancer is an expression of that. So that's one way of describing it. Or basically what's happening when people experience cancers, which is something we'd want to talk a little more granularly about because it's a term that's thrown around without proper nuance, is that ultimately your body is activating an ancient survival kit, which is founded on regeneration, actually. Because what happens when a normal cell, right, that's mortal, right, has a certain life cycle, if it's a liver cell, might last, a few months or something, a skin cell or epithelial cell, a few days, and then it's replaced by a new cell because there's a stem cell that's relatively immortal that's there waiting to regenerate that tissue. So cancer is actually a byproduct in a good number of cases of those regenerative cells being continually assaulted and taxed with the job of having to constantly replace destroyed tissue. Right. Let's say you smoked, right, for decades. The miracle isn't that people that smoke, the oddity isn't the people that smoke get cancer. It's that they don't get cancer much, much sooner. Right. And some live longer than people that look ostensibly healthy, right? That just eat too much. It's because our bodies are working 24/7 to replace the tissue that's being harmed. And so what's happening ultimately is when those stem cells are recruited, some of the same hormones are released that you find in conventional cancers that you do when you repair tissue from injury or other forms of adversity. And so it's hard to really distinguish the two. So I want people to understand that when you look at cancer through a regenerative lens, you start understanding the body is actually very intelligent, and it's recruiting what is fundamentally a immortal cell line in your body. The stem cells come from the germ cell line, which is basically, sperm and egg. And those cell lines have been replicating for at least 3.4 billion years, depending on what timeline you apply. And in fact, the first cell was believed to be deposited here through the panspermia hypothesis through a meteor. Now, does not preclude necessarily a more biblical explanation for the origin of life. But the point, because both what I'm saying is that even the science in biology and astrophysics and all these different converging disciplines show that life is actually immortal. And when people start to understand that, we have a deal in our body as metazoa, complex animal life, that most of our cells are programmed to die and be replaced because the point is to pass on the immortal seed to the next generation. So cancer is actually when some of that regenerative process gets taxed too much in a lifetime due to what you might call the Anthropocene, which is the epoch of all these novel new chemicals, again, going back to pharma, going back to high tech, applications like coal tar firing and nuclear plants and non-native EMF. All this stuff has contributed to a natural response. It's a cause and effect, just like karma, that's all that means, to a very unnatural way of living. Yeah. So given the right conditions, the body will repair and will heal. A quick example of that is if you look at some of the research on cancer cell lines, which I've indexed on GreenMed Info, reported on, simply administering something like vitamin C can sometimes cause an epigenetic regression of an immortalized cancer cell to a now differentiated and mortal cell. calling that an anti-cancer agent isn't really appropriate. What it's basically we're saying is that cancer isn't caused by a lack of chemotherapy or radiation. It's a lack of nutrigenomic information that is required to regulate the epigenetic and genetic infrastructure of our body through an ancestral dietary template and lifestyle template. So it's really divergence from nature, which is again saying response to these artificial conditions that's caused cancer as a symptom. But it's not what people think. Cancer isn't this juggernaut of chaos and death. It's basically a way to wake us up and say, hey, there's something off and it can be healed. You just have to change the conditions and actually detox the body, because it's interference with the body's self-healing that causes disease. It's not like, oh, the genes were just set up to, by the way, oncogenes actually are regenerative genes. The most ancient ones were actually responsible for some of the miraculous behavioral capabilities and physiological capabilities of species like the Hydra, which are immortal species. These things, yes, you can incinerate them, but if you break them into parts, they actually replicate into a full adult forever. That immortality exists in life. It's just hidden in little cells, and then some species, deep in the ocean, whatever, still exhibit it. And that's ultimately what can be tapped when you're dealing with what we're told are incurable diseases like cancer. And that goes for the whole spectrum. Every single disease on the planet can be healed. And that's something that you don't need Jesus necessarily to have the evidence for. It can actually be found, in my opinion, in what I call the new biology or the new biophysics.
Sayer's really a brilliant man and used some terminology in his interview that you might not be familiar with. The gist of his message is simply that our cells are designed to constantly regenerate themselves, and that under the right conditions, the body's able to heal itself.
As long as you feed the body what it needs and take away from the body what is causing poison, toxicity, or immune suppression, you can cure almost any disease. But you have to change the environment in which your body's physiology and cells live in to change your experience of living. You can either be healthy or you can be sick. You get to choose, but you have to make the choice.
What are the right conditions for healing from cancer? Throughout this docuseries, we'll be digging into the specific ways you can set your body up for success by eliminating the toxins that cause cancer cells to grow out of control, and what you need to add to your life to live healthy and cancer-free. Two of the terms Sayer also reference are epigenetics and the new biology. In our next interview, we meet the man whose research is the foundation for the new biology, which has revolutionized the way that many healthcare practitioners think about how cancer and other diseases are actually created in the body. One of the most common things I hear from people is that they're worried they're going to get cancer because their mom or dad, a grandparent, or even a sibling had cancer. But should you worry about cancer being hereditary or that you've got the so-called cancer gene? Bruce Lipton is an internationally recognized leader in bridging science and spirit. He's a stem cell biologist and best-selling author of an amazing book called The Biology of Belief. Dr. Lipton began his scientific career as a cell biologist. He received his PhD from the University of Virginia at Charlottesville before joining the Department of Anatomy at the University of Wisconsin School of Medicine in 1973. I'm honored to call Bruce a friend, and he's been instrumental over the years in the work I do helping people with cancer. In this incredible discussion with Dr. Lipton, he explains the role that your genetics actually play in the likelihood of you getting cancer. Just as importantly, you'll learn how your thoughts and emotions and the beliefs you were raised with factor into the cancer equation. So Bruce, thank you so much for being here.
Nathan, I want to thank you so very much because I know your work is so profoundly important in helping our planet evolve, taking us from the view of being victims of the world to really recognizing we are powerful creators of our life and our life experiences. And so thank you for this opportunity to help empower our audience.
Absolutely. It's the one thing I love about your message always is it's about taking back control of ourselves, taking power over our lives instead of being victims. That's exactly what we're going to do here today is help empower people. So, I personally own and love all of your books. I've read all of them. My favorite book of yours is, especially for today's topic, is The Biology of belief. In the biology of belief, I want to read a paragraph here because this is really going to set the frame, I think, for our conversation today. So in the biology of belief, you write, unfortunately, we conveniently forgot about the cooperation necessary for evolution when Charles Darwin emphasized a radically different theory about the emergence of life. He concluded 150 years ago that living organisms are perpetually embroiled in a struggle for existence. For Darwin, struggle and violence are not only a part of human nature, but the principal forces behind evolutionary advancement. Darwin wrote of an inevitable struggle for life and that evolution was driven by the war of nature from famine and death. Couple that with Darwin's notion that evolution is random, and you have a world, as poetically described by Tennyson, that can be characterized as red in tooth and claw, a series of meaningless, bloody battles for survival. This description, Bruce, about human life that Darwin writes about has informed, I believe, much of our conventional medical approach to cancer and other chronic diseases that we see today. And so I want to ask you, can you speak a little bit more about that?
Well, yeah, because most of the world is still locked up in the belief system that was really propagated in that theory. And I go, so what is the emphasis of the theory? And the emphasis was, even though Darwin didn't know about genes, he knew about heredity. And he said that heredity controls the character of our lives. And I go, well, that was interesting. That was before we even knew what genes were. But then that sent science on a mission. They said, well, if heredity is controlling characteristics, which include cancer, then basically, if we understand heredity and how it works, then we'll get at the root of where cancer comes from. So they were pre-directed to say, let's find what controls life. And in 1944, that was the first year that a scientific assessment revealed that DNA was the essentially programmed part of our lives. By 1953, that's when the DNA double helix came into our world. And it fit the story at the time that DNA was controlling us. And that's when we got into the belief that genes control the character of our lives. And this is a story that's been propagated. And I say, well, what is the deep meaning of that? Because I was teaching that 50 years ago. I was teaching medical students something called genetic determinism. I said, what is that? Well, that was a scientific belief that genes determine the character of our lives, that genes turn on and off, and in the process create our biology and our behavior. And I go, well, that was a really cool idea, except for the fact it turns out, well, that's not really true. And I say, but what is the meaning of it when we teach it? Well, the meaning is this. As far as you know, you didn't pick the genes you came with. If you don't like the characteristics, you can't change the genes. And then add on top of that, that we're told that genes turn on and off by themselves. And I go, well, then in that case, then my life is not under my control. It's under the control of my genes. And I go, well, then that makes you a victim. And this is what people walk away with. Oh, I have cancer. I have diabetes. I have heart condition. Oh, it's running in the family and the genes are manifesting this. So everyone walks away as a victim of heredity. Yeah, cancer especially. The cancer gene is in my family. I could get the cancer. I'll walk down the street and one afternoon the gene will just say, turn on. And then I end up with cancer. It's like, I'm a victim. Well, that's the conventional belief system. But a number of years ago, I had a unique opportunity to see another insight into the nature of genetics. And that insight is today the new science called epigenetics. And people go, well, epigenetics, genetics, it all sounds the same to me. And I go, no, here's what the difference is. As I mentioned, let's say cancer is under genetic control. And what that really is interpreted meaning is there's a cancer gene that turns on and gives you cancer, okay? And I say, what does that have to do with you? And I say, well, you're just a carrier of the gene and cancer is in your life right there. So again, I'm a victim of, there's breast cancer gene running in my family, okay? And I go, well, that would be very interesting if it was true. But the fact is it's not true at all. And I say, well, what is that? I said, because the idea that genes turn on and off by themselves is a complete fabrication. It's not true at all. A gene is a blueprint to make the proteins, which are the physical body parts when you assemble them, okay? It's like one of those kits where you can assemble pieces and make stuff, you know? And I go, we have 100,000 different genes, and all the different cells in our body are combinations of these genes, a muscle cell, a bone cell, a skin cell. They're all based on the proteins that the genes are blueprints for to make those cells. I go, so what? I go, a gene is a blueprint to make the proteins. I go, yeah. And I go into an architect's office, and she's working on a blueprint, and just for fun, say, hey, is your blueprint on or off? She look at you, what are you talking about? It's a blueprint. There's no on and off. It's a blueprint. I go, precisely. A gene is a blueprint. It cannot turn itself on and off. The whole belief that genes have the ability to self-actualize, meaning they can control their behavior, they can control when they go on and off and all that. And I go, 100% false. Genes are blueprints. Epigenetics now reveals that a gene can be read as a blueprint. And I go, yeah, that's how you read a gene. I go, does a gene read itself? I go, no. I said, well, then who selects the genes? I go, our consciousness, our mind, and there's subconscious and conscious levels and all that. And I go, it's how we respond to the world that activates the genes. The new science is called epigenetics. And I go, let's say, old story. Cancer is under genetic control, meaning genes control cancer. Now I say cancer is associated with epigenetic control. I go, what does that mean? I say, there's no gene that causes cancer. It's how you respond to the world and how you influence the genes. And I go, we influence the genes? I go, epigenetics means this. Epi means above. What do I call skin? Epidermis. I go, why is that relevant? Well, just underneath the layer of skin is a layer called dermis. And I say, so what's above the layer? Epidermis. I go, why? Because epi means above. So when I say this program is under epigenetic control, it means this program is under control from above, not in the genes, above the genes, epigenetics. And I go, well, what's that? And I say, it's the environment, and more importantly, our perception of the environment is sending signals that select which genes are going to be read. And more importantly, the way we perceive the world, we can change the readout of our blueprints. Just like an architect, I can change the blueprint from the same gene blueprint, which is a blueprint to make a protein. I actually can make over 3,000 different versions of proteins from the same blueprint. I say, how can you do that? And the answer is epigenetics is like a scissor and tape. Take the blueprint, cut it into pieces, tape it together in a different sequence, and you get a different protein. And so it's like, oh, not only do we select the genes that are going to be activated, but we can change the readout of the gene that's going to be activated. I say, well, who's changing the readout? I say, how we are dealing with the world. Our perception of the environment is used to adjust our genetics so that our biology can thrive in an environment that's always changing, because the genes have to always adapt. And I say, the genes don't adapt. It's epigenetics. It's your consciousness. And I go, well, why is this relevant? I say, what's the conventional belief about oncology today? There are oncogenes, genes that cause cancer. I go, there is no gene, this is a fact, there's no gene that causes cancer. There are genes that are correlated with cancer. I say, what's the difference? I say, causation means the act or agency which activates something, causes. Correlated means something is associated with it. I say, oncogenes do not cause cancer, they're associated with cancer. And I go, so why is it relevant? I say, well, look at the people, especially the women, of course, in this case of the BRCA breast cancer gene, and they find they have the gene, and the first thing is like, oh my God, I could get the cancer, I got the gene. And I go, does the gene cause cancer? I go, well, 50% of the women that have the BRCA gene do not get the cancer. I say, so why is it relevant? I say, having the gene does not cause cancer.
Right.
Having the gene is correlated with cancer. I say, so what's the correlation? I say, a disharmony in the system is what provokes the diseases. As a matter of fact, we always talk about genes cause all the diseases. Here, scientific fact, less than 1% of disease is connected to genes. Less than 1%. I said, well, where's all the disease coming from? 90% of disease is now recognized to be due to stress, a breakdown of the community of your cells. We look at ourselves as a single entity, and I go, no, a human body is made out of 50 trillion cells. The cells are the living entity. Bruce, oh, that's a word for a community of 50 trillion cells that you're looking at right here, community. I go, what's relevant? When there's harmony, the cell and community is healthy. When there's disharmony, the cells express disease. And all of a sudden I say then, oh, the genes didn't cause the problems like cardiovascular issues or cancer. It's not caused by a gene. It's caused by a problem in your perception of the world that is causing disharmony. And it's a program. I say, and consciousness controls this. I go, yeah, but then I have to say, that's now we step back. I go, but there's two sources of consciousness in your brain. One is called the conscious mind, which is the latest evolution of the brain, a lobe of tissue right behind your forehead called prefrontal cortex. This is the seat of the conscious mind. You go, what's the conscious mind? It's the one connected to your personal identity. It's the one connected to your spiritual source. It's you and nobody else. And I say, and what's the function of the conscious mind? It's creative. That's what does it have? Wishes and desires. That's what we have with the creative mind. And I go, okay, what's the other mind? I go, oh, that's called the subconscious mind. I go, what's that? I say, it's programs. There's nobody in there. It's a hard drive. And I go, so why do we have a subconscious mind? Then I step back and give you a very important fact. The brain is the most advanced computer that humans have ever experienced or know about in this world. There's no computer that can match this. And I go, but it is a computer. Fact. I go, so why is it relevant? And I say, there's functionally the equivalent of a silicon-based computer that you might be using now to watch this program or watching a movie or whatever. And I go, so why is it relevant? And I said, go to the store, let's buy a brand new computer right now. And you bring it home and I say, push start. And it boots up, the screen lights up. And I go, okay, now let's do something. Let's write an essay or let's make a drawing or a spreadsheet. And I say, I can't do it. I say, you just got a brand new computer. What are you talking about? I say, not until I put programs in the computer can I use that computer. I go, so programs? I say, well, yeah. It turns out the subconscious is the equivalent of a hard drive with programs in it. I say, oh yeah? I said, well, when did you get the programs? I go, in the last trimester of pregnancy, the brain boots up, screen's on, brain screen's going. I say, yeah, but can you do anything? I say, no, why not? I said, just like a brand new computer. If I don't have a program, I can't use it. So for the first 7 years of your life, your conscious brain, wishes and desires, that's not working yet. First 7 years, your subconscious is downloading programs of how to behave. I say, where do the programs come from? I go, in that first 7 years, your brain activity is in a vibration called theta. And when I talk about vibration, I'm talking about you put wires on a person's head, read their brain consciousness. It's called electroencephalograph, EEG. I go, so what? And I say, well, in the first 7 years, the vibration of the brain is not at the level of consciousness. A child up and through age 7 is predominantly in a vibration called theta. I go, what's theta? I said, well, it's characterized by imagination. That's how children mix the real world and the imaginary world. Let's have a tea party. They pour nothing into the cup. They drink the nothing, and then they talk about that was the best tea I ever had. And I go, that's mixing imagination with reality. That is theta, okay? But theta is hypnosis. I go, hypnosis? I go, yeah. I said, what do you need it for? I said, that's how you download the programs to get the computer off the ground. I say, how do you download it? I say, observe, just like a video recorder. In hypnosis theta, whatever I observe is the downloaded program. I say, well, who are you observing? Mother, father, siblings, community. I go, what kind of programs you get? You ready? Programs of how to be an effective member of a community, how to be an effective member of a society, a family. I say, how do you get those programs? I say, you watch your mother, download her behavior. Watch your father, download his behavior. Watch a community, download their behavior. I go, why is it relevant? A kid has to conform to the culture and society they live in. And there are rules, as we all know, thousands of rules. I say, so how is an infant going to learn 1,000 rules? You're going to give them a textbook and say, hey, listen, read this book and we'll come back and talk about it. I go, no. The evolution created a download period for the first 7 years. where the brain is not consciously creating, but it is absorbing behaviors by observing others and making programs. So your fundamental programs in your mind, in the subconscious, they didn't come from you. They came from other people. So the programs, do they necessarily support your wishes and desires? That's conscious mind. I say, no, it's their wishes and desires or their programming. So all of a sudden I say, well, then the fundamental programs that you have in your mind that are creating this body didn't come from you. They came from other people. And if they have a problem in their life, so do you, because you just downloaded their behavior. Okay. And everyone says, well, genes are controlling this. And I go, little story about cancer. They followed the fate of children adopted into families where there was a cancer running in the family lineage. And what did they find? The adopted child will get the same family cancer with the same probability as any of the natural siblings. But the adopted child came from completely different genetics. I say, so why was it relevant? The child is expressing a cancer not because of the genetics they came into the family with. They're expressing a cancer because the programming that occurred in that first 7 years of that child's life was a state of disharmony, not support, living out of balance, whatever those programs they downloaded. And I say, so why is it relevant? The cancer in these kids didn't come from their own genes. It came from the programming they got. And this is epigenetics. The mind is adjusting the genes of the body. And I say, so why is it relevant? I say, well, that's where we come back to two minds. The conscious mind is creative, wishes and desires. Do you think you were wishing to make a cancer? I say, no. And I go, why? I say, it's not from the creative mind that cancer came from. It comes from the program in the subconscious mind that you downloaded from other people. I said, why should I play the damn program? Why don't I just create my life and have fun? I go, and this is the monkey wrench in the machine. So this is the big box that needs to like pay attention, big box. And the point is this, is that the conscious mind is creative. Yes, it has wishes and desires, okay? But the conscious mind can think. And you go, what the heck does that mean? Well, when the conscious mind is paying attention to the world, it's looking out your windows like the windshield of a car. You can see where you're going, you see what's going on. You have a choice to turn left, right? You got choices, okay? But when the conscious mind is thinking, it's not looking out the window anymore because thinking is inside. I go, so if I'm driving down the street in my car and I'm paying attention to where I'm going and everything, and then I start thinking, I say, then I'm not paying attention to the road because my conscious mind just went in to have a thought inside. I said, oh, I'm in trouble. I go, no, subconscious mind is autopilot. When the conscious mind is thinking, the subconscious mind takes over the control. The subconscious mind knows how to drive. It's a program. The subconscious mind knows how to talk, how to do your job. Anything that we have created habits, the subconscious mind's a habit mind.
Right. It's not just program the first 7 years. It's the other way we program the subconscious mind is by repetition, right? Doing something.
Well, that's that after age 6, after age 7, excuse me.
Yep.
The first 7 years is hypnosis. But you still learn things. You learn how to drive a car after age 7. I say, how did you learn those programs? I say, after age 7, we learn programs by repetition, as you just brought up. Practice, practice. You want to drive a car? Practice. You want to play a musical instrument? Practice. You want to learn a new thing? Practice. And I say, through practice, we create programs. And once the program is in there, it's automatic behavior. And they're really good. A lot of people think, oh, the subconscious is where all the evil is. And I go, hey, no, the subconscious is programs. Don't blame the hard drive. It's the programs that are the problem. And it's really important because the programs are what are running your life 95% of the day. If you have an accurate program and live in harmony with life, you're going to be healthy. But if you have a dysfunctional program that puts stress on your life, then automatically you're opened up for illness. And I say, so 95% of life is not coming from the wishes, desires, creative, conscious mind. 95% of your life is coming from the programs that you downloaded from other people. So these are not programs that answer your wishes and desires. And if you downloaded dysfunctional programs, then you have a dysfunctional life because 95% of your life is coming from that. So a very simple conclusion from a guy who's making million words here, the simple conclusion is this, is that you are not controlling your life with your wishes and desires. 95% of your life is coming from the programs which you got from other people. And if those programs do not support you, support your vitality, your health, and all that, and you're playing negative programs 95% of the day, then guess what? You are causing a breakdown of the system. The cells are like miniature people. You got 50 trillion citizens living inside your body, and your mind is a government. And if you have a government that says, you're evil, you're bad, you're not good, blah, 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 it's like, what do you think is going to 50 trillion cells are going to respond to? It's like, ooh.
Well, from a biochemical and neurological point of view, you know, if you're looking at the world through this Darwinian perspective, right? Or this, you know, we're brought up in a family that is quite dysfunctional, abusive, you know, the world's against us, you know, it's money doesn't grow on trees, whatever stressors that we were raised upon, right?
Yes.
Fend for yourself and all these things. Then,
and the other one is like some of the program that a lot of us get is, who do you think you are? You don't deserve this. You're not that good at this. These are criticisms that parents lay on the kids as they're developing. And I say, why? Because the parents are acting like a coach on a team.
Yeah.
If the player isn't doing well, the coach says, come on. The coach will say, oh, please do better. The coach says, that's not good enough. You can do better. You know, you don't deserve to be on this team. But a player on a team is generally older than 7. And I say, why? Because now they're thinking and they understand that the coach is saying, hey, you want to stay on the team? Work harder. That's what you need to do.
So can you talk a little bit about what that actually does, that subconscious programming that I think everybody, we could pretty much assume, you know, just about everybody has some negative subconscious programming, one or multiple programs, right?
Multiple.
When we're living that way, what is that doing at a biochemical level, at a cellular genetic level that is leading to things like cancer and chronic disease in the body?
So a brief recap on the understanding of genes are controlled by the environment. I say, what is the environment of the cells? The blood. Cells live in a body. It's like an aquarium. You cut yourself and the blood leaks out. That's the fluid. And I say, oh, so the environment for a cell is the equivalent of the blood. I go, yeah. But epigenetics says the environment controls the genetics. I go, well, how does that work? I say, the chemistry of the blood determines the fate of the cell. That's bottom line. I say, but then who controls the chemistry? I go, the brain controls the chemistry. That's the chemist. I go, now comes the most important piece. And it's like, so what chemicals should a brain be putting into the blood that influences the growth and vitality of cells? I go, the brain translates the picture in your mind into complementary chemistry. It's like paint by numbers in reverse. Here's the whole picture, and the mind breaks it up into different pieces of colors and said, oh, the colors are hormones or emotional chemicals or things like that. And I say, so the brain sees a picture, translates it into chemistry, releases that into the blood, and guess what? The body will then be designed to manifest that picture. Is it a picture of health and vitality and I'm super powerful? Or is it a picture of, oh, I'm a victim, I'm weak, I have no control over my life? I go, that's 2 different chemistries. And I say 2 different fates. And all of a sudden I say, oh, then genes did not control this. I go, no, the picture in your mind controls this. I say, what about cancer? I say, that's not in the conscious mind. Nobody's going around going, geez, I wish I had some cancer today. That's creative. I say, nobody does that. I say, then where the heck does the cancer come from? The subconscious. And I go, oh, programs that are actually taking you out of harmony? Yeah, I go like that. And I said, well, I would see if I was doing that. And then I tell the story that I've been saying for 30 years. I say, you have a friend and you know your friend's behavior. And you happen to know your friend's parent. And then one day you see that your friend has the same behavior as the parent. So you want to volunteer, you know, you can't, hey, Bill, you're just like your dad. I said, back away from Bill. The moment you say that, I know exactly what Bill's going to say. He's going to say, how can you compare me to my dad? I'm nothing like my dad. And everyone laughs because they've had that personal experience. I said, that's the most profound story I can tell you at this moment. I said, what is it? Everybody else can see that Bill's behavior is like his dad. The only one who can't see it is Bill. Explain it. I go, yes. Where did he get the behavior? He downloaded his dad's behavior in the first 7 years of life. Why can't he see that he's playing this behavior? Why is he playing this behavior? Answer, His conscious mind's not paying attention. It's thinking. I go, so what? And I say, well, that's when the subconscious steps in as autopilot. But if it's got a bad program, it's going to play it. And I say, will you see you're playing a bad program? I say, not really. Why? You're not paying attention. That's why you're playing the program. And so the idea is this: we are creating our lives not with our conscious wishes and desires mind. 95% of our life is coming from the program. And if there's cancer running in a family, guess what? It's not the genes. It's the behavior that precipitates a cancer that's running in the family.
And that behavior could, just to clarify, I mean, that behavior can be stress, anxiety, fear, self-doubt, all these things that are, we know, activating hormones in the body that are going to suppress the immune system and actually induce an environment that is supportive of chronic inflammation. Chronic inflammation leads to cancer. We also, but other behaviors, right? Like, food behaviors, foods of taking in too many toxins and too much toxic material, which we know damages the DNA, right? And food that's not nutritious enough, and we know that's not giving our cells the nutrients they need. So what you're talking about is not only thinking behavior, even though that's the primary focus of this. Are you also speaking about just cultural behavior in terms of lifestyle decisions that we're implementing as well that lead to cancer?
This is 100% true, Nathan. You realize this is like different countries have different kinds of cancers. That's a predominant version of cancer. I go, what, do they have different genes? I go, no, it's basically their culture emphasizes something different than the other culture emphasizes. And since culture is the environment and the environment is shaping biology, then two people genetically identical in two different cultures, take two identical people, move them in two different cultures, they're going to have totally different life expressions. It's also like, hey, identical twins are born with the exact same set of genes. And one of them could die of cancer when they're 50 and the other could live to 100. I go, well, how does that happen? The answer is they all have the same genes. And it's like, it's not the genes, it's the life experiences that are activating those genes that determine the outcome in the end. And so basically cancer is not living in harmony with your 50 trillion cell community. Whether they're stressors are physical, emotional, or chemical stressors, any of these stressors can cause a disruption of the community. Cancer is an expression of a disruption of the community. Cancer is like homeless cells. I go, what do you mean? I said, look, our community in life, and what do we have now? We got homeless people living on the street, living in cardboard boxes and things like that. They're all over the place. I said, what do they represent? I said, that's the equivalent of a cancer. Why? They're here, they're participating in no way of supporting you, but they're using your resources. They got to live, so they're getting food, they're living and doing things. I say, are they supporting the community? I go, absolutely not. Matter of fact, you get too many homeless people and the community doesn't exist anymore. Basically, that's what's happening. So what's going on inside the body is actually a reflection of the same thing going on the outside of the body. We're in so disharmony outside that reflection on the inside via epigenetics, taking the vision and turning it inwards, is the primary cause of cancer. As I said, there's no gene that causes cancer. Genes are correlated with cancer. And then the problem is, well, our old belief, Darwinian, genes create the character of our life. I've got cancer. Let's kill those cells because their genes are causing cancer. I go, no, the cells are just responding to the environment that you gave them. You can kill all the damn cancer cells you want, but if you didn't change the consciousness, there's going to be another wave of cancer coming from somewhere else or the same place because you didn't change what causes the cancer. The cancer cells, this is hard, but you got to hear it. The cancer is a symptom, not the problem. I go, why is it relevant? Well, cut out all the cancer cells. You cut out all the symptom. I go, you didn't change the problem. Problem's still there.
Cancer comes back.
It comes back. And that's the issue. If you don't want the cancer, you don't kill the damn cancer cells. You know what's interesting is our subconscious mind is programmed. Yes. I say the conventional program, is that when children grow up in a family, conventional family, if someone gets sick, where do they go? The doctor. I go, what does a child learn by age 7 when it comes to sick and ill?
They have no control. They have no control over their health, their life, nothing.
No. And who's the professional? The doctor. I say,
Yep.
why is it relevant? Because the doctor's truth becomes your truth.
Right.
I say, so why is it relevant? I said, consider a prognosis. A prognosis is telling you a future from a professional that you've given power to because the doctor knows. And I go, wow. So guess what? You get a diagnosis. You got 3 months left to live. And the idea is, what is your body doing? Well, 95% of the day it says that, yep, I got 3 months left to live. It's counting down. It will die in approximately 3 months, whether you had the cancer or not, if you bought the belief. And I go, you mean belief is controlling it? And I go, hey, it's 100 years of placebo. I said, what's placebo? I said, placebo is you have an illness. The doctor comes up and says, you know, we've been fighting this illness a long time. It's not really working out really good, but guess what? Got a brand new drug, brand new for your illness. This is the drug. And the patient takes the drug and they get better, only to find out that the drug was a sugar pill. And I say, so tell me then, where did the healing come from? It didn't come from the sugar pill. It came from the belief in the sugar pill, the positive belief that this is the healing thing. I take it, I got well. I go, did the pill do that? I say, no, it was your belief that that's where I'm going. A placebo is a consequence of a positive belief. That's basically what it is. And everybody goes, oh yeah, I'm familiar with a placebo. And I go, but you're not paying attention to the fact is this. It's not just positive beliefs that influence us, negative beliefs influence. It's belief. And I say, what's the difference? I say, negative belief doesn't heal you. A negative belief can do everything. You can die from the belief that you're going to die. You can die, you can get a disease because you've been programmed to believe you're going to get that disease. Placebo is the consequence of a positive thought. Nocebo, the negative version, is a result of a negative thought. And they're equally powerful. And everyone talks about the placebo as a special thing. And I say, what about nocebo? And they go, what? Nocebo? I go, you didn't realize that your negative thinking is equally powerful in controlling your genetics as is positive thinking? And that the vast majority of our thinking, 70%, is negative, disempowering, limiting beliefs. I go, you have more negative beliefs than you have positive beliefs. What do you think the net result is going to be?
Well, and this is why we see today, right? Well, first, I just want to acknowledge how much wisdom you just shared in the last, short time we've been together. I mean, decades and decades of wisdom in such a condensed time. I think people may have to go back and listen to this once or twice to really digest. And I encourage you to listen to this a couple of times, again and again, because there's so much here that is so powerful that when you walk away understanding this at a deeper level, you realize that your health and your fate, for the most part, really is in your hands. You can control your destinies. You said genetic determinism. Our futures don't have to be determined by our genetics. And in fact, they're not. They're determined by our choices, but we have to understand the choices that are leading to the results that we're experiencing. Right.
But the important part is, how about if most of those choices are unconscious?
Yep.
That's where the problem comes from.
Yep.
Today, I'm going to get healthy. Today, I'm going to get the great job. Today, I'm going to find a relationship. I say, that's my creative conscious mind with a wish and a desire. And I go out and I come home at 5 o'clock going, didn't happen today. I don't know why. I had all the positive thinking. And I go, the reason is your positive thinking is only working 5% of the time.
Yeah.
Your program is working 95% of the time. And like in the story of Bill, you play these programs and you don't even know you're doing it. You're sabotaging yourself because you have no reflective vision back that I was even involved. I came home at 5 o'clock, it didn't work. I go, how come? I wanted to have it work. And then all of a sudden, what does a person do? I'm a victim.
Right.
These people got in the way. This thing got in the way. That thing got in the way, which means I didn't have any power over this. I'm a victim.
So we have to reprogram our subconscious, and we want to talk a little bit more in a moment how to do that. And before we do, I want to say a couple of things briefly and ask you a couple important questions as well. Is One thing I've come to believe in not only learning from your work over the years, but 15 years in my own personal healing and health and spiritual journey, is that now I used to believe it was the opposite. Today I believe that 80% of our healing, our health, our vitality is in our mind, our consciousness, our thoughts. And 20% is the physical, the nutrition, the diet, the exercise, the other important pieces. 20% is really important, right? And this is not a scientifically verified number. I'm just basing on the 80-20 rule, where I used to think it was the opposite. And one of the reasons I confirm this belief for myself anyway, I'm not saying this is anybody else's belief, is that so many people who I've come to meet and speak with who have reversed stage 4 cancers, they were doing so many of the things right: the nutrition, the diet, the exercise, the sleep, a lot of the physical important things that are really important, but they were under stress. They were anxious. They had underlying fears, childhood traumas, things that they had never resolved. And when I asked them, I say, what do you really feel caused your cancer? Oh, it was this divorce. After we divorced, my husband killed himself, and I blame myself for that. Or my child was molested, and I blame myself for my child being molested by the babysitter that I hired that had no idea. Right? I mean, these are real stories again and again. And when I finally got to these traumas and healed these traumas, changed my subconscious thinking, healed my stress, became more, joyful, peaceful, happy, cancer went away. And it happened again and again and again. I'm not discrediting the importance of diet, nutrition, exercise. All these things are going to help your body significantly, right? But if you've got that underlying programming that is sabotaging you at a cellular level, at a genetic level, as we're talking about, right, that is creating an environment at a DNA level that is basically preventing your body from healing, then it may be very challenging to actually heal. So that's why I think this is 80% of the work. That's just my opinion.
Well, it's real important because the story you brought up is very important to me, because years ago I had a small group of people that came in because they wanted to hear where's the new science and stuff. And so we used to get together and talk about it. And one of the women, Mary, came in, and she had breast cancer, and then it went throughout her body, and then they gave her, oh, you're in a support group, and but it's not looking too good. And she came in with another friend from the support group. So both of them having the same issue, both of them in the same support group. Once I started to give them the understanding about how genes worked and that it was programming and all that. And she went over her life and said, yeah, I see it now, Mary. And she said, I gotta change my thoughts on all this stuff. And she did. And guess what? She went into remission. No cancer, disappeared. The other woman said, yeah, that's a good idea, but never followed through and did anything. But her conscious mind heard the data, but her subconscious program was still the same program. And then I see them at a Christmas time when I'm driving in San Francisco, and they were going across the street, and Mary is pushing a woman in the wheelchair, her friend that she brought, who was on her last days of life. And Mary's out there Christmas, enjoying life and everything. And that was great. Then, just as you just said, Mary got her daughter was now connected with a neighbor to work for the neighbor and his job. Then she finds out that the neighbor was forcing himself on her daughter. And she got like, oh, what did I do? Guess what? She got breast cancer right after hearing that.
Wow.
And she died. And I go, what was the result of that? I said that as long as everything was cool and she healed herself, everything was great. But as soon as the fact that she put her daughter in harm's way and she took the guilt on, just as you just said, immediately the cancer came back and she died. I go, so what about the cancer? I said, when everything was cool and she figured it out and it all worked out and she felt good, the cancer disappeared. And all she needed was that bad news that came back in, and the cancer instantly came back, and she lost her life.
Yeah.
Exactly what you just said.
Yeah, it's sad, and it's that's why this work is never ending, right? It's continual forever for the rest of our lives, and it's empowering work. I mean, I speak from experience that it is Very empowering. We're going to have challenges. We're going to have traumatic experiences. We're going to have lost loved ones. But if we have the tools to help us through those and actually how to transmutate that experience, right, instead of harbor it as resentment or guilt or fear or any of these things.
So we're very careful now as to where we spend our time. We're not motivated by where we can make money anymore. It's where we can make money, provided it doesn't impact on our personal lives. We're just not interested in anything which will cause stress. So we've turned away a lot of business and a lot of opportunities. You know, we define them as opportunities in the past, but I don't think they are when you look at the totality of life. But there's lots of business opportunities that torpedo your life. You might make a lot of money out of them, but they're no good if you're not around, if you're not around for your wife or your kids.
Wow, you know, Dr. Lipton is such an amazing researcher and speaker. And now I think you've got a better understanding of just how important your beliefs and your subconscious programming is when it comes to preventing and healing from cancer. Coming up in the other episodes that we're going to be sharing with you, we're going to dive into some of these tools that you can implement at home with Dr. Lipton and the other amazing experts we have in this docuseries to help you heal the emotional trauma and negative thought patterns that can contribute to and even cause cancer and other chronic diseases. We're also going to dig into the other areas we discussed in this interview, such as diet and lifestyle. We've got so much more to come, and you're not going to want to miss any of it. Be well, and I'll see you in the next episode.
Well, the latest scans and the latest blood work have shown that all the tumors are shrinking. I'm not making cancer anymore.
I had scans in June of 24, and I was all clear.
I recently had an ultrasound that indicated my tumor had shrunk from 9 millimeters when detected 2 years ago to 5 millimeters now. And that's almost a 50% shrinkage.
In the end. So, you know, that was a big lesson. Just deal with the situation, learn as much as you can about it, and then decide the actions you need to take from that information. If you don't act, nothing's going to happen. Nothing different is going to happen than where you're at.
Right now, please do everyone you know a favor and share this series online. And then take a look at the ownership packages on this page and take advantage of the limited time discount we've put together for you. By owning this series, you're going to gain confidence and learn real solutions for preventing and helping your body heal from cancer. And our team here wants to thank you for your support. Thank you for being here. Thank you for being committed to your health and for sharing this with others. And I really look forward to seeing you in the next episode.
To my surprise, many of them were stage 4 on palliative therapy and basically sent home to die. And when their tumor started turning around and they went into remission after several months, I couldn't believe it. It was like, what? Why didn't they know about this at the university hospitals? Why wasn't anyone teaching this? And so what we're seeing is these estrogen mimetics. In fact, I have 3 patients. One has prostate cancer. His 2 buddies have prostate hyperplasia. They all play golf, and guess what? They're all drinking all day long on the golf course out of plastic bottles.
My entire career of being in the medical industry, I dislike band-aiding. And what I mean by band-aiding, for those that may not understand the term, is giving someone something they have to take every month or they can't function. I like to fix the source problem. What we need to understand is 70% of immune function is tied to the gut bacteria. If we don't have the proper gut bacteria, again, like I said earlier, you're going to be functioning on 30% immune. Yes, you can live, but the problem is you're susceptible to a lot of things, and you don't have to be.
Well, we know for sure as we age, both our risk of obvious heart disease and sadly our risk of cancer both go up. So there's a lot of overlap in my patients with breast cancer, prostate cancer, other, common colorectal cancers, melanoma, of course, and some of the young people have it too, sadly. Is it accumulated toxins and environmental toxins? Is it genetics that just take time to alter our metabolism and lead to enough growth and enough cellular damage to show up as heart disease or cancer? All these are possible. We can do so many things right. And if we're getting a couple things really, really wrong or really off, then all those amazing things that we're doing aren't going to work as well. And so it really is kind of like a puzzle. Like once we get enough pieces in place, then we can see the full picture. And that's really what we're looking for. If you can open up your belief that you can heal instantaneously, even with cancer, there's important medicine just in changing that belief. So we can upgrade our beliefs. We can upgrade our thought streams once we become aware of them. And we can actually do this consciously.